Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your natal Chiron in the 12th house. And Chiron is the wounded healer. It shows us the area of life where we have an unhealed wound. And when we figure out how to heal ourselves, we can also heal others. The 12th house is Pisces domain. And the ruler of Pisces is Neptune, so Neptune is a ruler of this house. Now, I read a lot of stuff, and I think that I read somewhere a connection between Chiron and Pisces in terms of the vibe that it's, gives off. Because, Pisces can be the victim, and there's like this suffering that's associated with Pisces. And this is an archetype. We're not talking about if you happen to be a sun in Pisces and you think that I'm saying that you're suffering all the time. No, or that you're a victim. No, not necessarily, but the archetype or the characteristics that make up the pure description, or whatever you want to call it, of that sign include those things, but it includes other things that are more what we'd call positive. So when these two elements combine, suffice it to say, there can be these themes of God, because the 12th house, being the house of Pisces, is the house of the spiritual life. Now, the 8th house is the metaphysical realm, and it can deal with death, and so it can deal with crossed over loved ones, and it can deal with metaphysics and the occult. So there's a spiritual connection to the 8th house. The 9th house I associate with the different religious doctrines and beliefs, dogmas, so organized religions, but God in general. So those two houses are spiritual as well. But the 12th house, I would say, is open-ended, spiritual dimensions, past lives, karma. And in the mundane world, it can represent hospitals and prisons, so places where people are suffering. Now, we could say they're atoning for their sins, whether it's the sins of their lifestyle for the hospital, or which is in the physical domain, or the mental hospital could be for the psychological domain, or the spiritual transgressions in terms of the prisons, or the crimes that people commit, that they're going against spiritual laws. And another thing about the 12th house is it can be any place of solitude. This is an area of quiet, the silence, the contemplation or meditation. And so it can represent hermitages, monasteries, that kind of thing. I used a site that I've been using for this series on Chiron called jessicadavidson.co.uk. One of the things she did not mention that I'm just going to bring up before I forget is I saw somewhere where they said that if you have Chiron in the 12th house, you may feel guilty for everything. And my feeling is, if that resonates with anyone, and it doesn't, and we're not talking about things that you've actually done in this lifetime, just random, vague feelings of guilt. So, somebody bumps you on the street and you apologize to them, but you just have this gnawing sense that you've done something wrong, but you can't put your finger on it. It could come from past lives. And so maybe we could say that the person is kind of tortured for their past sins in this lifetime that they didn't commit in this lifetime, but they still have the memory on their spiritual hard drive called the soul. So, so that was something that I read before. Now, this website separates, I should have said it's not just Chiron in the 12th, but Chiron in Pisces. And I have Chiron in Pisces. And in looking at what she said, what I would say is that I personally don't resonate with this too much. And I think sometimes these are like overly dramatized, but some of you may feel very much like this represents you. So, just see if it fits you. But I think you have to look at the big picture and see how it all fits in all together. And also what house. So if you have Chiron and Pisces, what house is it in? Like mine is in the 11th house. So maybe that sub-influence of Aquarius makes it more detached and less like they're talking about here. So look at what sign it's in, look at what house it's in, and then combine the two. So another thing to note is that I'm putting this in my own words, so I don't want to, attach her name to it and just act like I'm paraphrasing it in the way that maybe she meant it to be. So I'm just doing it my own way. So one of the things is having porous boundaries, which can make you very impressionable. So that means that you're very influenced by the people around you. Porous boundaries can mean that it's very hard for you to know where you begin and someone else ends. Or, maybe it should be where someone else ends and you begin. And this can also, I feel, be when people have a hard time saying no and oh. No, thank you. Can you help me do this? No, thanks. Or I'm sorry. That can be very difficult because if somebody wants something from you, you may feel like you're obligated. That there's no possible way for you to just not do it. Because then you would feel guilty. And it's funny because the next thing that I wrote was guilt about individuality. And that's part of it. When you look at yourself as a separate self, then you may have different desires than somebody else. So if somebody wants you to help them and you want to take the day off and not do a damn thing, it's like your needs or your desires don't mean anything. It's all about them. And getting back to the thing about being too impressionable, the 12th house and the 11th house to me have something in common, and it's about the collective. The 11th house is the collective in the mundane sense, about groups of people in the world and, the unity that we crave or that we seek, and these different groups. So sociology could fall into studying different groups, but also just our own individual friends and things like that. So there's like different types of groups, and then there's humanity as a whole, but that's on the more mundane level. In the 12th house, it's about the collective soul. Remember, there was a band called Collective Soul. And I don't know if you'd call it a paradox of life or something that you have to be able to understand side by side, is the concept of having individual souls and then having a group soul, or having all the souls together being at one with God. And part of that is the fact that we are we can do both things. It's like walking and chewing gum at the same time. We're able to be individual souls, and yet we have a unity in that we are all children of God and we're all part of God. So the key is being able to honor both of those things. If you just think about yourself and you don't think about the rest of humanity or the rest of the souls, then there is that self-centeredness. And if you only think about the collective and even the collective soul, then you're not going to honor your specific journey, spiritual journey. And that's not, I mean, we came here with different missions, but the ultimate mission is about that, connection with source energy and with each other, the merging of that. And speaking of merging, it's interesting too. I don't know exactly the source of this desire, but this is also true of the sign of Pisces. Or if you have a strong 12th house, or maybe you don't even need a strong, just having personal planets there, or sun, moon, or moon in Pisces, there can be a desire to merge with God. And the same can apply if somebody has Chiron in the 12th. And what happens is that they're looking for this ecstasy or this bliss that comes from that. And the thing that I'm wondering about is it a memory of the spiritual sky? And I think that that's probably what it is. There is this inherent memory of what it feels like to be in heaven or the spiritual sky. And I shouldn't just say heaven, because there might be different dimensions of the spiritual planes of existence. But anyway, they're like, I mean, people who have near-death experiences talk about feeling so free and feeling so light, like the body was weighing them down, and they felt like finally free. So that kind of bliss. And losing oneself, losing your personal identity and just merging with God. Now, that can be kind of scary sometimes too. It feels like annihilation, not to have that individual self. But sometimes having an individual self is painful because there's separation. There's that feeling of separation, that you're alone, that other people are not connected to you. And the 12th house can feel like a sense of alienation in general, because it is this area of solitude. Or if you think about somebody who's in a hospital bed after hours when nobody can visit them and how lonely they might feel, or somebody who's in prison who feels like they're completely, deserted and locked up and the key thrown away. So there's suffering in that isolation, And, this can also happen too if a person has like the moon in the 12th house. Not necessarily the sun as much, I would say, but definitely the moon, because it's the emotional nature that can feel a sense of loneliness. So I don't know if I would say that Chiron in the 12th can make a person feel lonely, but they can feel like they want to merge with God. I think about George Harrison. I was just listening to All Things Must Pass, his first solo album. And he was a Pisces, so that's why I'm bringing him up. And I'm saying, if you're a sun in Pisces or a moon in Pisces, you may have similar experiences in life where you just feel this. He has a line in, there's more than one song where he says this, but in My Sweet Lord, he says, I really want to know you. I really want to go to you. And there's some other song too where he was saying something And I could tell that it's like longing for that connection with God. And some people, when he says, I really want to know you, people can feel that desire to be, it's merging with God, but also understanding the meaning of this existence, if you will. And that desire to feel that bliss and to lose oneself and to lose a sense of self can cause a person to engage in substance abuse, in taking substances that, and it can be anything. It could be alcohol, it could be heroin, it could be pot. I mean, I think, a drug like heroin, I've heard people talk about something like that where they didn't feel anything, it was like the closest that they could feel to God. Now, obviously, if you've ever seen a heroin addict, you know that they suffer incredibly. And that whatever that feeling that they're chasing, they're probably not experiencing it very often, or after the initial stage, and then they're just trying to not feel sick. So, but even if they're like kind of like semi-conscious, that kind of thing is not the same as experiencing God consciousness. It can't be, because it's a form of inertia, in a sense. It's not that, or being like blind drunk, or being, any of those things. Maybe, a less, dire example would be somebody who does psychedelics, and that's more of an active experience. The reason when I talk about heroin and those opiates and downers, alcohol and all those things, is that they're downers and they dull the senses. They're not things that put you into a state of consciousness where you can, they don't raise your vibration, in other words. They probably lower it like crazy. So the point is that psychedelics can at least simulate or open those doors of perception, as William Blake talked about. But even that can become habitual, and the person gets attached to that outer thing instead of like exploring it through their own consciousness. So, but it's the drive to do it that I'm talking about. So that could be why somebody does it. And that's why I'm saying it can run the gamut. Even somebody who is getting drunk every night and passing out, and you would say that's a low state of consciousness, that person is trying to avoid pain at the very least. And so one of the things about the 12th house is that this is the placement of the empath, or maybe you could also say Chiron and Pisces. So depending on your overall emotional nature, that can lead to somebody who is, if you have, like, let's say you're a water sign, sun and or moon, you may already have that sensitivity, and this just enhances it, or you could say exacerbates it. Maybe if you're an earth sign, maybe if you're an air sign, this actually gives you a little bit more sensitivity to others, whereas you might be more laid back about what is happening in general. But there can be maybe an oversensitivity because the person doesn't have the boundaries to be able to protect themselves from taking in the energy of other people through maybe not even realizing, being very impressionable, like I said earlier. And so one thing I put here is the fear of mundane reality in life. And that's, again, I think that's connected with that desire for this bliss state, the God state. Because anything less than that, if a person has a cellular memory of what it felt like to be at one with God, on the other side, and then coming here, there could be this sense of like a stark contrast. And that can feel very hard to deal with. And as we all know, there are some people who come into this lifetime who are, from Jump Street, very sensitive and maybe prone to either depression, anxiety, a lot of being overly sensitive, maybe social anxiety, and just feeling like, the 12th house is like the hermit house, feeling very like the world is a very cold place. I think those kinds of people will also have like the sun in Pisces or maybe Cancer. They just will have a lot of that accompanying this position, because this is not an inner planet and it's not necessarily going to affect your personality to the nth degree, but it still can exert influence on you for sure, and you can tell. Like it's very interesting because, my moon sign is in Virgo and I'm not a water sign. And I just always wondered, why was I so emotional and sensitive? And yet I have this detachment too at the same time. And I realized it's because I had, an opposition from the moon to Chiron and other hard angles to Chiron. So that can increase the sensitivity that the person feels, and also that sense of like that empathic sense where you can tune into other people's suffering. And, there's a good side of that because, again, being a natural healer is a wonderful thing. And in order to be a true healer, you have to be able to tune into other people. You can't do it from a textbook. You can't do it from the intellect. It has to come from a very heart-centered place. You may find that there's a lot of disorganization and chaos. I put, disorganization. She put chaos. But I think disorganization is what she meant with chaos. But it can be emotional as well. Emotional chaos, maybe physical chaos. It makes it hard for you to be practical. And the 12th house is not practical. The 12th house is very nebulous. It opposes the 6th house, which is Virgo's house, and that's all about order and discipline. So there you go, night and day. In an attempt to help others, you are sacrificial in your personal health, well-being. So whether it's so in other words, this happens sometimes to people who are in the helping professions, who are natural empaths, where you find that your physical health is compromised or your mental health is compromised because you're you're being exposed to the suffering of other people, and it's just adversely impacting you. It's, even if it's not personally happening to you, it still can affect you. So this is one of those things that you have to figure out a way, if you do want to go into this line of work, how can you protect yourself more? And because otherwise, but you have to really engage in radical self-care probably, because otherwise if you neglect yourself, then chances are you're not going to be able to do it very long. You're going to burn out. So let's see, what else? Well, I had said fear of the mundane reality of life, and part of this is because Neptune and the 12th house are very connected to fantasy, the ideal, and there's a pain in reality. You know what I mean? And again, with substance abuse, that people who tend to want to always escape through their substance of choice, they tend to look at life as being colorless and not magical enough. And so that can be another, besides the pain, the personal pain that they might be feeling, they might feel that life is too non-magical, unmagical, whatever the word would be. So in terms of specifically for Pisces, Chiron and Pisces, she mentioned feelings of victimhood and betrayal and life not being fair. Now, I told you that I have this placement, and I'm very outspoken about not going through life feeling that way. And I tell people when I see online and I see that they're, expressing those feelings of victimhood, I really, challenge people not to do that because I don't believe that. So that's an example of me not resonating with what she said. But I could see how some people might, especially if they are Sun in Pisces, Moon in Pisces, Cancer, something where they may feel like, or maybe having hard angles, Sun square Neptune, Sun in the 12th, Moon in the 12th, 12th house placements as well. And maybe for some people, they're not really concerned about themselves, but they're concerned about other people. But that can be a trap as well, because the do-gooder who wants to save the world can end up trashing themselves or kicking themselves to the curb and burning out or flaming out because they're not honoring themselves, and they think that they have to save everybody else. And really the premise to me is faulty because it's saying that this world is random and chaotic. This universe is random and chaotic. I don't think so. I think that there is divine timing, and I think that there's divine order. And so when things are happening, I think that they are happening because they're supposed to happen, even if they're not pleasant things. And no, I don't think that's spiritual bypassing. I think that you can't have it both ways. You can't say that you believe in God and yet God plays favorites, and that's why some people are born, in abject poverty, and some people are born in mansions. There has to be some reason for that. And it might surprise us what that reason is. It might not be what we think it is. The person born in the mansion might feel that it's a curse at a certain point in their life. And the one who is born in very humble circumstances may be quite happy, but we're projecting onto them that they have this terrible life. Everything is relative, and everything is a projection onto other people. So yeah, I can understand. I just don't personally feel that way. The rescuer attracted to the underdogs of the world. Now, she wrote the word underdog, and I kept it because I think that's such a great word. And I do think that there are people that might do that. Again, that's not me. That really is not me. And it's because of other things, I think, that are in my chart that make me more... I have a lot of earth. I think that makes me more grounded to a certain degree. Not completely. But outwardly cynical yet sensitive inside. Yeah, maybe. Not necessarily cynical, but I think that, trying to appear a little bit more nobody's going to pull one over on me and all that, and maybe being, having trust issues about other people's motives, but there's that inner sensitivity. And we have to stop thinking of sensitivity as a liability, because it's not. Insensitivity is actually a liability, because it can cause people to do terrible things to their fellow human beings. And sensitivity means that you know that even if something isn't happening to you personally, the fact that it's happening to anyone is a sad thing, if it's a negative thing. And so the thing is not allowing sensitivity to override your common sense and your self-love, compassion for yourself. Have the same kind of sensitivity for your own needs that you're giving to other people, is how I would advise if I were going to. Don't pick one over the other. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you'd like a personal reading, I do chart readings. You can check me out at RenaMoonAstrology.com. The link is below. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.